The Truth Girls. The Truth Girls.
Hi everyone. Well, I've been getting a lot of messages in my inbox, people asking me to talk about the National Defense Authorization Act of 2012. My own friends are calling me up and like freaking out about it, that they're going to designate Americans as terrorists, they're going to use the military against Americans, although we live in Canada, but we feel very sympathetic towards the Americans, and we're right next door, so it's scary for us too. And they're going to use FEMA camps, and the protesters are all going to be designated as terrorists, they're going to end up in the FEMA camps, and this is what this is all about. I'm trying to figure what this is all about, and it's just another one of those really weird rabbit holes. Well, here's one article from rollingstone.com, Indefinite Detention of American Citizens Coming Soon to Battlefield USA. So they say that this NDAA contains, among other things, passages that A, officially codify the already accepted practice of indefinite detention of terrorist suspects, and B, transfer the responsibility for such detentions exclusively to the military. And then they talk about, what are the possible ramifications of this, like, is this really just going to take Americans' rights away? Everybody's going to be designated as a terrorist, and they're all going to end up in, Guantanamo or indefinitely detained somewhere. And this is, possibly a very slippery slope and could be very dangerous. And here's another article on it from Washington Square News, NDAA bill to strip Americans of rights, expand government power. So they mention here that sections 1031 and 1032 include language that, if passed into law, would give the president and the military full authority to arrest, indefinitely detain, and interrogate anyone involved with Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, or anyone associated with a terrorist organization. The other article mentions that the wording in the bill officially only pertains to a person who was a part of or substantially supported Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, or associated forces that are engaged in hostilities against the United States or its coalition partners. That's what the bill says. It makes it out to be like about 9/11, Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, things like that. It doesn't say anything about, like protesters in the United States. But still, if you had a cousin living in Afghanistan and you sent him some money, to buy groceries or something, and later he got arrested as a terrorist or detained as a terrorist, then with this kind of bill, they could probably say that you were funding a terrorist organization and detain you indefinitely as a terrorist, even if you're an American citizen. Now, the second article mentions that it was passed in the Senate 97-3, and that an amendment proposed by Senator Udall that would have excluded American citizens from this legislation was not accepted. And at the end, they mention, Obama has threatened to veto the bill with these current provisions, and I pray he does. But then there's this, from OccupyTheGame.com, Senator Levin reveals it was Obama who required the Indefinite Detainment Bill, NDAA, to include U.S. citizens being held without rights as part of the wording. Well, that's really weird. Why would Obama insist on having that wording in there and then threaten to veto the bill? They explain that Obama previously threatened a veto for Section 1032, but not 1031. 1032 does not concern imprisoning citizens without trial. He has never suggested using a veto to stop Section 1031, citizen imprisonment. Russia Today says Obama insists on indefinite detention of Americans. It says here that Senator Levin told Congress that in the original NDAA, American citizens were excluded from the provision that allows for detention, but when Obama's officials saw the text, the administration asked them to remove the language that says that U.S. citizens and lawful residents would not be subject to this section. So they specifically asked them to remove that. And then at the end it says, President Obama could sign off on the legislation as early as this December 13th if he chooses not to exercise his veto power. This is very confusing. Because why would Obama veto a bill that he had specifically made changes to so that the bill would be this way? It just doesn't make any sense. What also doesn't make sense is, like the first article said, the legislation is already basically there. The government basically already has these powers, and this is just sort of codifying it. So whether they pass it or not, it doesn't really change much. In the big picture, we're always heading down that road to tyranny. There's no doubt about that. But this bill doesn't really change government power all that much. So that's weird. And then why would he insist on having this language in it and then exercise his power to veto it? You know, it's just so strange. And so then I was thinking, you know, Obama's running for re-election in 2012. And this is a very unpopular bill. This is not the kind of bill that presidents usually pass when they're running for re-election. This is the kind of bill that they pass when they get into office. Like when Bush Jr. passed the Patriot Act and Homeland Security bill, or when Obama got elected and then passed the National Healthcare Reform Act. So that's the kind of thing they do. They get elected, then they pass unpopular bills. They don't do that when they're up for re-election. You know, Obama's done a few other things recently. He's taken troops out of Iraq and Afghanistan, although that doesn't mean very much for the Iraqis and Afghanis because they still got plenty of mercenaries over there. But he did that. He also declared his support for the Occupy Wall Street movement. And those are things that make him look good. So maybe this is just an elaborate ploy to make Obama look good. Like this would give him the opportunity to veto an unpopular piece of legislation. And maybe this is just part of an elaborate charade to get him reelected. Because even though they use rigged Diebold machines, they still have to have, you know, a pretty significant part of the popular vote for any particular candidate. I mean, they can't just have a candidate who has like, you know, 20% of the vote and then magically he comes out with 51% majority. They still have to mount an elaborate publicity campaign and get the public more or less on board. And then the rigged machines just ensure that that candidate is going to come out on top. So either President Obama is just going through this elaborate thing to make himself look good to get reelected. Wouldn't that be funny? Like he puts that wording in there and then he vetoes it and then he'll make some speeches about how like this was against the Constitution and blah blah blah. And he would just do that, you know, to make himself look good. It sounds crazy, but everything is crazy. Everything is just so nuts. You never know. So either he's doing something like that, or he's going to pass this. I mean, it would be like almost election suicide, sabotage to do something like that, to pass it like right before you go get elected. That's almost like a guaranteed way of shooting yourself in the foot, so to speak. And I guess that would mean it's time for a new puppet. So let me know what you think. Do you think it changes much in terms of American law? Or do you think it might just have something to do with the upcoming election? Well, leave me your comments. Let me know what you think. And thanks for listening to me. And I'll see you next time.